Now. Hi, I'm Janet. I'm Tamron Tech Rep, and usually we do this in person live, but since that's not happening anytime soon, we are doing it in the comfort of our home and safe. So I call this macro and chill because what perfect time to do this because we're stuck inside. And I will just start off right off the bat that I usually don't do macro photography. So this is both a learning thing for me, and I definitely learned the challenges on the way, and finding things and how to see them in a different light. So hopefully you'll get some inspiration from what I've taken around the house and to shoot them. And yeah, so let's get right into it. Let's see here. Oops, it's not going. Oh, here we go. All right. So what is macro photography? I know there's a lot of confusion with some people wondering, is close-up photography the same as macro, or is macro the same as close-up? So macro photography is, according to Wikipedia, is extreme close-up photography, usually of small subjects or insects, and where you make it to look like life-size. So to give you a visual, this is what the camera sees when you are trying to photograph something. And the ratios, you'll see them on lenses, or you may see them in print somewhere. 1:1 stands for life-size. So that is, what goes through the camera is what you see. And then 1:2 will be half of that, 1:4, a quarter, and so on. And to just give you another idea of macro versus close-up, the same ratio. But don't get so bogged up about the ratios. I know a lot of people get confused. I got confused in the beginning as well until I saw these visuals, until I came up with this analogy of, wait, hold on. Oh, is at the end. Well, here is the different ratios. So just to give you a visual, 1:4, and as we get in closer, 1:3, 1:2, and then 1:1. So enough about that. I came up with this analogy because the way I learn is better through analogies and visuals. So for all my bourbon and whiskey drinkers out there, because I'm a bourbon drinker, I'm sure you've heard this phrase, all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. So to translate that into an analogy of how I use it with macro is like, macro photography is essentially close-up photography. It's kind of loosely interchangeably used in that sense, but close-up photography is not necessarily macro, because to be a true macro shot, it needs to be a shot with a true 1:1 macro lens. But in like with anything, bourbon whiskey or macro close-up, they kind of loosely used interchangeably. All right, so my arrows are not working. Okay. So I'm going to start off. Here's a quick format of how I have this laid out. It's mainly visuals, like shots that I took, and I'll do like a behind the scenes shot of how I took some of the more complicated ones. And I'm going to start off with, like, we're going to warm up a little bit to it. So these are little basic things we can start off finding around the house. And then we'll get into like a little more complicated setups with like introducing light and then external flashes as well. So these are examples of, you can totally find these at home. And I got this idea from my coworker, Jillian, because she is actually the macro guru. And I wanted to try and shoot something, the coin, to see if I can find something else in there, because she shot a penny and, where is it? Oops. Okay, I think my slideshow is out of order. But anyways, okay, so we'll get to, oh wait, no, I'm sorry. This is an example of a 1:1 macro, and I was showing this as an example of a close-up photography with the 18-400, because, which is telemacro. So with telemacro, you can shoot, let's say with an 18-400, you zoom all the way out to 400, and then you get it in as close as you can, depending on that lens's minimum focal distance. So in this case, with the 18-400, you can get as close as about a little over 17 inches to get a telemacro shot. So this was, I was showing the difference between a 1:1 with a 90, with our 90 macro lens, and then a telemacro. So here are some guidelines for equipment setup. I started out, when I first started out, because being stuck home, I didn't do any of these. I'm more of a handheld free form shooter, I guess you could say. I usually don't use a tripod, and I learned quickly with macro. It is very helpful. But in the beginning I did it, and I was really frustrated with that. If you have a remote or a shutter release cable, that helps as well with certain, especially I live alone, so it helps to have an extra hand, or even I don't have the remote, so I use the timer on my camera on some of the shots. And definitely manual focus. In the beginning, I did autofocus, and it was just so frustrating because it was just hunt back and forth. But I learned quickly that manual focus helps as well. And just to start off real quick, on my shots, you'll see on the bottom right will be the type of lens I use. And just to quickly go over briefly what some of the markings mean in Tamron terminology. So DI, if you see DI after the focal range, that stands for a full frame lens. DI2 would be for crop sensor, APS-C. DI3 would be for mirrorless, or I call it other, because it also includes some of our micro four thirds lenses as well. So those are the quick designations. And this is the 90 is our true macro 1:1. So that is mostly the shots are in this presentation are with the 90, but then also I'll do some examples of telemacro as well. Okay, so finding things to shoot around your home. These are the things I started. We're gonna start, like I said, basic stuff. When you're starting to warm up, this is like probably the first couple of weeks when we started, staying safe at home. And yeah, again, the coin. And I shot this, going back to what I was trying to say earlier, I shot this because my coworker Jillian shot this penny, and I didn't know that you could see a blinking sitting right there in the memorial. So I was trying to find something in a quarter, didn't see anything, but I'm still gonna keep on looking for that. A banana. So I was eating a banana, and I figured I would just try to see what it looks like up close. So these are things that I just popped in my head as I'm going through about my day. I try and think, because at first it was really hard to try to find, I'm not in the macro mindset like usually. And this is how I started just coming up with ideas slowly. And then also these are chocolate chips. So I just placed them on a plate, and the lighting actually is from the window, and I just held it, and then I just shot it with my camera. Oh, which by the way, for reference, I know a lot of people asked in previous webinars, I shoot with the Nikon D70 with the 90 macro on these shots. And for most of them, I don't think I use any other cameras for this presentation. Other ideas, I know if you have kids, families, definitely dig into their toy boxes. I'm sure there's Legos. You can definitely find Legos to put them in different scenarios, or action figures. It's really cute how I see this kind of a thing now, or as I learn, I'm looking up stuff online, how people are using action figures and setting them up in different scenarios, which is really cool. I kind of want to try one with Batman, so I'm Team Batman. Also, this was actually something I had done over the holidays, actually for you, Ben, for your holiday presentation. And this was an idea back then where, and now since we're stuck inside, you can get prepared for your holidays if you want to try and create holiday e-cards for your friends and family. Definitely, I set up little scenarios like this. This was a little mini elf on a shelf. It was like really tiny, and I set it on my nightstand. This is the setup right here, and in the back are fairy lights strung on my I think that's my Westcott extra backdrop. And that's a different setup, but basically just set them up however you want. And at the, you know, during the holiday seasons, you get like, you know, those seasonal candies with the, you know, the kisses that are already dressed up as Santa hat. So that's really convenient, you can use as a prop. So now we're getting to my hummingbird's bed. And so this is, I know it may seem counterintuitive, but this is me holding the 150-600 and I'm doing a telemacro. And I did not know that you can stand this close with the telemacros, because usually you think of 150-600, you're going out to a safari, the zoo, shooting wildlife way out in the open. But this is my balcony. And yes, my latest hobby is hummingbirds. And so I have a hummingbird feeder hanging, and I figured why not try to shoot them while I'm stuck at home. So this is how I was propped up on my stool, just to get somewhat eye level with them, so I'm not shooting into the sky. And this is just one of the shots I got of my little hummingbird. He comes like every day, and I think he's kind of a bully, actually. He like kind of bullies the others and doesn't want them to get to the feeder. So yeah, I got one of these shots, and I'm pretty, wow, I did not know that I could use the 150-600 in such a confined space, because like I said, I think of that lens as for birding, you know, out in the wildlife, or, you know, going on a safari or at the zoo. But here I am on my balcony with the 150-600 doing a telemacro. And with the 150-600, you can get as close as the minimum focal distance for this is 86.6 inches, which is a little over 7 feet. If we go back, so that's about, I was propped on my stool and a little over 7 feet from my hanging hummingbird feeder. There's another shot I got during that same time that I was shooting this. This was all in the beginning while we're all just got stuck at home. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's perfect timing, because I've been wanting to play with my hummingbirds and I want to try to get some shots, and I did. And this is one of my best shots I think I've gotten so far of the hummingbirds. And this was pretty much straight out of the camera, except I might have cropped it just a little, just for the proportion. And so yeah, definitely this is telemacro, zoom all the way out on your telezoom if you have one to get a telemacro shot. All right, now we're going to get into kind of now we got, you know, some of the basics, you know, warming up to it. Now we're going to introduce some light. So another thing you can look for in your kitchen. This was just a simple setup. You can get a bowl. I used a Pyrex bowl, fill it with some water, and add some drops of oil. It can be any oil. I used olive oil. That's what I have at home, but it definitely could be any kind of oil. And then I filled the like a Pyrex bowl with some water right here. And then if you have colored paper or, you know, cardboard paper, that's great. But I don't. And I know that you can look online and just get different gradients, like on an iPad like this. You can do a search for like gradient background, whatever colors you like. I don't know if you can see that without the reflection. So yeah, like that. And then put the bowl on top, and that gives you the colors on the bottom. And then that way you can move it around, whatever colors you like, to get different colors. And if you want more pinks, you can move it around. So that's one example of getting close up with water and oil. And now my next setup is really the next thing I found in my place. I found this and I didn't know, I was like, oh my gosh, I could probably shoot this and make it look like a plant. So here it looks like a plant, or a really odd looking plant, but it's not. And so these are the different focal ranges that I've tried. You can see if I'm shifting. So this is early on when I was learning to focus with the 90, and because the slightest movement, because you're so close, you can like easily shift focus. So, and I usually like to move myself. I'm like a physical focuser. I like to move back and forth or side to side or physically move myself. But I know now that it definitely helps with to use a tripod. So this was early on, and this I'm in the learning stages as I'm at home doing macro. And then this is actually what it was. It's like a little ring. Um, I call it a raver ring, but it lights up too. And this was the setup for those shots. As this little LED light I use, that's a little cork coaster, and I lit with the little LED in the back, and that's the this is how I got it to make it look like a weird looking plant, maybe. So here's my next setup. Again, using the same Pyrex bowl and the loom cube, a little loom cube light underneath to light from the bottom to do like, so straws are really popular when doing macro. And I was playing with this to get some, like, try to get some abstracts or colors. And you definitely can, you know, move those straws any way you want. I have the rubber band to keep them close together at one point to try, but I kind of spread them out. And then I laid them on the side, and I liked how like the light just kind of blew it out and makes it look like it was melting. So that was kind of neat. So this is my next setup. And I know, I don't know, some of you may have seen this. It's kind of an old macro shot or macro technique from way back in the day I've seen in the past. And I figured I'd finally put it to use. So you take like 3 sheets of paper or how many sheets of paper you want, and I stapled them. And then again, I had the external flash, the speed light, and I have it on wireless. So that's a little storage container, like a, you know, one of those containers you put clothes away. And I took that, put it inside, and with the papers, the stapled papers on top. And then, I actually put different gels too. So since I only have one speed light, I used to have 2, but I only have 1 now. And so to try to get different colors is hard. So I split gels. I use split gels. So I have this pack of all kinds of gels, and I figured I've never put it to use. So I figured I'd try them. So I just been trying different combination of gels, and then this is what I got. And try different ways of placing them as well. All right, so for my next setup, again, in the kitchen, I know the strainer is a popular tool to try to do macro. So this is a handheld strainer. This was my setup. And the background is this blue padded envelope, which I don't know why you would send this in mail, but yes, I have this for a backdrop. And then again, using the external flash. And again, I tried different gels, like split colored gels again, to try to get different colors because I only have 1 light. And I have the Loom Cube, which I shine on the background. And this is what I got from that. So this is, I was trying to, so in the back, because the padded background already has like this texture, I didn't realize that as I shine my Loom Cube on it, it created a bokeh effect, even though they're not lights. So it's kind of a faux bokeh. I guess I could call it foca. So you see here, the different gels created the multiple lights. So I wanted, like, you know, the rim to be the yellow, and then more of the reds, and mixed with the, you know, red, yellow, mixed orange. So mixed in with the different colors. So that way it looks like I have multiple speed lights, but I don't. And then another close-up, popular thing to use is forks to do extreme close-ups. It was the same setup I had in the, with that. I just put forks on it and tried and played with it. And I used different gels on this as well. And a whisk. I was trying to do something abstract here. I wasn't quite sure. I think I might try and play with it again to get the look that I'm trying, maybe try a different gel, I'm not sure. So these are just ideas, you know, things to find in your kitchen. And then I started getting into a little more complicated setups. I was like, so yeah, with all this time, I'm like, okay, let's try to like step it up. So this, outside of my balcony. I set this up. I brought my nightstand out. I did the setup, you know, using the tripod now. And I have these Westcott arms. Thank God I have them because, like I said, I live by myself and I don't have all these things to hold everything. So I had these clamps, and I figured I use a Target bag. Um, I brought on the left, you see, like I have this kind of it's a jumpsuit. So you can look in your closet if you have any textures or backgrounds or shirts that have like maybe crazy designs to use as a background, you can use that. And so that's why I brought that out. I tried it at first. I didn't quite get the look I was going for. So I figured I tried this Target bag. And this is how it looks overhead. So I also picked out the leaf was just from there's a tree that's really close to my balcony, and it reached over and picked off a leaf to put in this I have like this little holder with alligator clips, and there's the leaf right there. So that way I don't have to hold it. Again, it just so helpful because I've learned macro takes so much, whereas I'm so used to just like shooting in the streets and just shooting wherever I want, but macro definitely takes some work. And this is what I got. It's not perfect, but I was trying to, I used there's a bottle with some liquid in it, and I used the same Pyrex bowl to catch all the liquid. And as it's coming down, I would just try to keep on shooting it. Trial and error, I just kept rapid fire, kept shooting, and finally got somewhat like that. And I was trying to get just a single drop. It's not quite in focus right here, but I mean, for trying this at home and, you know, just playing around, I think it's pretty good. I mean, I'm happy. I mean, after like, I think it ended up being about 250 shots. Then I decided to try Macy's bag because of the star. I was like, maybe you can try catch a star in the drop. And so same setup, switch out the bag, same leaf, same everything, and kind of caught it. I mean, it's not quite how I want it, which I'll probably try and practice, but I kind of I think I like the Target bag better. All right, so those were my ideas for what I found at home so far. And now we're just gonna go look at some other past photos that I've taken, or some photos that I think my colleagues have taken, my coworkers. So we're gonna dig into the archives here. So a popular thing also, if you collect items that you have a bunch of, so that's another idea to like just put them all together and take a close-up of those. As you're walking, if you're, you know, going outside, try and get your activity nowadays, walking around your local neighborhood, you know, bring your camera, try to do some abstracts, leaves, simple leaf, you know, the way you look at it, different angles, you could get, you know, different abstracts out of that. This was actually taken quite a while ago, probably 3 years ago, at the Los Angeles Natural History Museum. Every year they have this butterfly pavilion where you can just walk through, and all the butterflies are free in this caged area. Probably won't happen this year though. So at that time I was able to get some close-up shots of butterflies. This is my first time ever shooting butterflies with the 90. And this is way back 3 years ago when I first shot with the 90, or doing macro period. And I remember I was so frustrated, and that's why I don't do macro. But now I know, just from learning at home, that manual focus definitely helps. And this, with all these, I was shooting autofocus, and it was pretty, I wish I knew back then what I know now. Some more butterfly shots from that exhibit. Dandelion. So there's another good example of telemacro. It's done with the 35 to 150. Again, zooming it all the way out and getting in as close as you can. And in this case, I believe this is almost the same as the 18400, where it's a little over 17 inches that you can get close to. Same here. So by comparison, 18400 versus the 35 150, that's the how close you can get. Same, I think, pretty sure it's about a little over 17 inches. The 90 shot this with a 90 of this yellow bearded dragon. One of my favorite shots, just because I know it's not like true, like super close up or anything. But I remember this was, again, at the Los Angeles Zoo. It was a private event, so these were out in the open, held by handlers, and we could get up close and shoot them. So, and I believe that's all I have for my macro shots. So hopefully these gave you some of the setups that I came up with throughout my time at home, things that I've discovered and challenges that I've come across. So hopefully we'll open it up now for Q&A, like what I've learned, and hopefully any challenges, or if you have any ideas for me or questions, definitely feel free to hit me up and take it away.
Thanks, Janet. And I just want to say, well, first of all, there's Janet's information if you guys want to follow her on social media and the like. I have never seen the water droplet with the Target sign in the water droplet before. Like that was pretty mind blowing. It's very inspiring, Janet. Looking at the work that you're producing around your home and realizing that it's, all these just, there it is. Yeah. All the little things that, it kind of redirects your focus when you want to look at, the world around you and what to photograph. So we have we'll go to questions. One just popped up here. And then there was a question actually before we get to this one that maybe Jen, you had kind of addressed too, but Jen, a lot of people were asking about tripods, and if you have like what you use, or if you have a recommendation, per like brand of tripod or type of tripod, or if there's a feature of a tripod that you really like.
Yeah, so like I said, normally I don't use tripods because I think I'm just lazy, but I have a really old one, and it's a Manfrotto, but I've been meaning to get a new Manfrotto. And I know Erica uses this as well, because I just interviewed her for a talk last week. Erica's like my one of my Tamron tech reps, and she uses I think it's Manfrotto. It's called the Be Free something. I know it's Be Free because I know I looked into the same one from somebody else. And I think it's Be Free Live or something like that. I can't quite remember, but I know there's something. I know I've been wanting to get a new one, because mine is just so ancient. My tripod is so heavy. It's from when I was in college taking black and white photography. And that's like, I don't want to date myself, so it's like a long time ago.
Would be the best of an old technology, maybe. Who knows?
But what I do like about it, even though it's so old, everything's manual, so everything I have to like adjust, like the legs and everything's like all separate. You have to like manually adjust it, but it's heavy, and I want to get a lighter one for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm a Manfrotto fan. That's what I started out with. I think with anything, whatever you start out with, you kind of stick to. But I know there's great other brands now. I know David Akubian, our image master, he uses Sure. So I don't know. I think it's just, it's kind of like car shopping. You got to go try it and see which one aesthetics wise you like and which one feels good to you.
That makes sense to me. I know that Jen, you said that there was any questions that folks could call in. Jen put the number for Looking Glass in the chat room. But Jen, there's since you deal with all the different brands
Right.
and you sell a lot of them there, what are some of the differences that maybe folks should be aware of or look for?
Well, I want to give a shout out to this group chat here because there were so many good suggestions. We had Three-Legged Thing mentioned, Benra mentioned, a specific ProMaster, and the truth is that almost it depends on what all you're going to be doing with it. For macro, there are certain things that you look for. Obviously, you need it to be really, really stable because the focus is so precise.
Yeah.
And being able to get down low or having a center column that works horizontally, but you also want to be able to take it places. And so, weight is a factor. Stability is obviously a factor. And definitely use a tripod for macro photography. You're going to be way happier with your results when you can actually control that and your slight hand movements or breathing doesn't screw up your shot. But yeah, call the store. I did mention specifically, like Shay and Kevin are there this morning. And so this week we're splitting the shifts 10 to 2 and 2 to 6 so that everybody's just working, half days and not getting overwhelmed. And Shay and Kevin in particular, like they love breaking down tripods for people. They will ask you all the right questions. They will find out like what type of connections you want on it, whether it's a twist lock or a snap lock, and what kind of weight you're looking for. And so that's really like what we're designed to do. We know all these products. We have over 20,000 products in the store. It's not our customer's job to know what they all do. It's us to just listen to what it is you want to do and match the right product to it. So tripods are one of the favorites because they are so diverse. And somebody specifically mentions like a ProMaster. There's a new one from ProMaster that has so many little attachments to it. So you can actually customize the entire tripod to your needs. So good, tons of options.
And then I will also want to follow up on that, piggyback that shout out to the chat group, because like just there are so many questions coming in and I love it. It's like the most questions I've ever had on any webinar. It just kept me like sitting there typing the whole time.
Well, you had to work, right?
Yeah, like I was, watching was kind of more listening, but then trying to think and type at the same time. It was great, brain exercises, I guess. When normally I would just go have another cup of coffee. So, but a couple questions for Janet and or Jen, since you're in here with us, Jen. Questions on describing or maybe talking a little bit about the difference between like depth of field and macro, or rather maybe like close focus and macro, and then to go one step further, if we're not putting too much on the plate here for you, Janet, the difference between like macro on a crop sensor camera versus a full sensor camera.
Oh, you know what? And that's the one thing I haven't really done yet on a crop sensor. So I'm not sure what the difference would be. These were all shot with the D750, with the 90. Mm-hmm. And then the telemacro, like the 18400, that was on, I don't even know what camera that was on actually at the time. But no, I'm not sure. Like with the telemacros, like I just zoom in and then get as close. I didn't even know you could do that at first until the 18400 came out. And when we advertised it as like, being, oh, you can do telemacro. And I was just like, I'm going to try this. So that's how I got into that. And then that's how I think the last webinar, somebody mentioned that it seems like I do more telemacro, which I did, to be honest. So that's why I try to do more true macro now with some of the close-up kitchen gadget shots.
Well, and could you maybe just go back over a little bit? You did it there toward the beginning, discussing, the telemacro versus the one-to-one. So, because I mean, telemacro is still, for all intents and purposes, a type of macro photography. So, I think just to reiterate for any folks that may have joined us throughout, kind of a little later on, the difference between the two. So here we're looking at the.
Well, I mean, I guess the analogy, like I know a lot of people think that there's a difference, but as far as like how you look at it, yes, there is. So like a true macro is 1:1, right? So these are the ratios. You'll see the difference as it cuts down in size. And when I mentioned the whole bourbon thing, was because a lot of people always like they get confused, like what's the difference between them. And like I said, it's kind of the terms are used kind of interchangeably, loosely, like macro is close up. But like according to like the analogy it's just close up is not truly a macro unless it's made with a macro lens, technically, but we still use that term interchangeably, right? It's kind of like saying champagne isn't from Champagne unless it's from, champagne isn't champagne unless it's from there, right? But a true macro, if you call it technically, it needs to be made with a macro lens. But like with anything else, we just kind of use it interchangeably. Close up to me, I guess, in my definition would be to use is a telemacro to bring it in.
Okay. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times that's probably where the questions came from. A lot of times it's they're almost indecipherable, depending on how close you can focus and the image you're getting versus something you've taken with a 1:2 or 1:1 macro. So
yeah, there's definitely that difference. The minimum focal distance for sure. So the 90, you can get so close, like just right on top of it. Telemacros, or telezooms, to get a telemacro shot or a close-up shot, you definitely need to be whatever the minimum focal distance is for that lens. That's the closest you can be. But for some of the lenses, like the 18-400, to be as close as 17 inches away, that's pretty impressive. And especially with I had no idea that you can be that close with the 150-600 on my balcony shooting the hummingbird at just like 7 feet away. I had no idea I could do that until I tried it. And so yeah, just standing on my stool shooting that to get a telemacro of that shot, I didn't know. Oh, there's a bird. Oh, nothing.
shiny objects for Janet.
I know. I have my
and
desk.
that's
Yeah.
And I don't know if you covered this at all in there, but since this is Tamron presentation, we'll give the Tamron plug that almost all, except for one lens that I know of, in the Tamron lens line has some kind of macro capability or like a minimal, the best industry best minimal focus distance, MOD. So that even goes with the telephoto lenses. So, going back to, Janet's experience with using the longer lenses to get those close focus / macro shots, like you wouldn't think that that's something you'd be able to do, but for anybody with the Tamron lens or in the market for one, it's a big plus that you get out of that Tamron gear. Some other questions over here, Janet, for you. Do you ever do any kind of macro? Obviously, the telemacro, it looks like off of a tripod.
Yes. So like this one I shot, I was just hand holding it. And
so talk a little bit about, like, because somebody was asking about handheld conditions, and obviously that's, I think we all know that hummingbirds are not slow or still creatures unless they're eating out of the palm of your hand. So how would you set that up so you could freeze the hummingbird like you did in those shots?
Okay, yeah. So definitely, I handheld this again only because at the time, this was like weeks ago when we were first started staying safe at home. Again, a tripod. I'm usually not a tripod person. So I handheld this, and the reason I was confident to handhold this is because I had success shooting this handheld at the LA Zoo last year. Shooting a lion like way across the way, hand holding it. And that was my first time shooting with the 150-600 at the time. And I couldn't believe I got a really sharp shot. So that's why I knew that I could hand hold it here. And to shoot, I know hummingbirds, yes, they do dart around, but since I've observed them staying at home, I see them every day. I observe them from my window. I know their habits now. So when they feed at the feeder, they'll either perch, right? So I know when they hover, and sometimes they'll feed and they'll back up a little bit and they'll just be hovering in the air. So I know that's my moment to wait for them to feed, and then they'll hover right there mid-air. Then I'll shoot them then. Um, continuous high shutter speed. Obviously that helps to get your kind of your spray and pray. And then continuous autofocus as well. So keep it, if your camera has that ability to, I know this one has that 3D tracking where it locks on and it'll just keep tracking the hummingbird. And yeah, and just a lot of shooting it and just keep, I mean, I'm perched on that stool, I think that day for like 45 minutes.
Patience. It's a patience
Yes.
game.
Which that's all we have. We have all the time right now.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's very true. And then question two about using, so in some of those you use different light setups. Somebody asked specifically about light rings, if you've ever used light rings, or I mean, I think it's just any kind of the light sources, if you can go over those again. I think we had, so, and before we do that, Janet, let me just throw this out there for everybody, because we're getting the question a lot. People who are not able to get in, unbeknownst to us before starting the presentation today, there was a cap at 100 attendees on the Zoom account. So what we're doing though, because we have this recorded, we're able to, Looking Glass is going to follow up with everybody with this presentation as soon as we are done with it, and they can get it processed. They'll get it out to everybody. So anybody that joined late and missed big portions of this, you will have the option and ability to go back and rewatch the whole thing. So we got you taken care of. And then, so now, Janet, light sources.
Oh, yes. So like I said, as I mentioned, for those of you that that missed it or weren't here during that part, I don't have that many, I don't have like ring lights or continuous light sources. I just have this one Nikon speed light, and then a little lume cube and some just household LED lights that I've been using. So to create the different, so I was trying to get creative, and I learned this trick from way back in the day, working at another manufacturer. The trying to create different colored lights, even with one light source. So for this one, with the strainer, I knew I wanted like one color to light the rim and then a different color on the main body. So that's why I split the gels on this one speed light. And then to get the little, what I call foca in the background, I just shined a LED light onto the blue backdrop. But other than that, I don't have any type of other lighting sources other than my big window with natural light. And that's why I think on the outside setup, I was trying to use, that light source outside and just lighting whatever the drop that I needed. Yeah, I don't have, I mean, I'm looking to get some other lights, but a lot of them are sold out right now.
I don't know why that would be.
No idea.
I think that, any other questions, anybody that maybe we didn't get to? There's so many questions coming in. I was trying to get them all. I think we pretty much covered everything. I love that shot. That is absolutely incredible, Janet.
What's that?
That shot of the target and the raindrop or water drop is just crazy.
It took a lot of patience, that's for sure. It took a lot of trial and error. That's another thing I learned with macro. And since we have all the time to just play around, that's how I learned to. That's why you'll notice, like, if you attend my webinars, they're usually all visuals, and I'll do like a behind the scenes setup, just because that's how I learn. I know some other people are more technical and they talk about exposure and all this stuff. I just go by trial and error. I like to see the setup, and then I'll figure out myself after so many tries.
Um,
I was actually going to jump in really quick, specifically about this depth of field for the one-to-one. So depth of field in terms of maximizing it in macro, and Janet, obviously you can jump in here too. But it's going to vary depending on your distance to subject, and then of course the aperture size you're using. The larger the aperture, the smaller the depth of field. The closer to your subject, the smaller the depth of field. So if you're able to stop down when you're really, really close to your subject, it will give you the most depth of field that you can get, but it's still going to be narrow because of how close you are to your subject. So those rules continue to apply, and that's when you start doing things like focus stacking to get more of those really tiny objects in total focus.
Yeah, I know everybody's been asking me if I've been doing focus stacking, and no, I just really haven't had the time to look into that. Definitely sounds cool, but I try to not do much post work, or I try to stay away from the computer as much as I can with all these webinars we're doing every week. But I know that with the focus stacking, basically you just take several images at different focus ranges, and then I guess in post or in some third party software you just kind of stack them together if the camera doesn't already have that ability. I think some cameras do that now, or I'm not sure. That sounds cool.
Just interject here, if you wanted to try and do some focus stacking and you're looking for some cameras that can do it in camera, Olympus is a good brand to check out.
And that was David, who works at Looking Glass.
I was just going to say that.
Okay.
David's here. So please compare results of macro versus telephoto under identical handheld conditions. Do you have any actual comparison photos that were in the presentation, Janet?
Of what now?
Telemacro.
Telemacro.
Of macro versus telemacro to show difference between the two. You know, the one-to-one macro versus a telemacro shot.
You mean handheld, right? They said handheld, or did they?
It didn't. Yeah, handheld.
Yes.
Do you have any handheld one-to-one macro shots in it, Janet?
Yeah, that's when in the beginning when I didn't really know how to do macro, like the butterflies, like these are all handheld, because they're out in the butterfly pavilion in a museum. So I didn't want to carry a tripod there. Because I don't think it was so confined with people walking around. I don't think they wanted any of that anyways. So this is handheld, and then the question was to compare that. Oh yeah, so right after it, this is the 35-150 handheld macro telemacro.
Okay. Well, and I know that we can. I don't know if you want to add to this, Janet, but when you're doing handheld, obviously with anything Tamron, we've got some of the best stabilization, which is going to come in real handy.
Yes.
When you're doing handheld and particularly macro. Let's see. Question is, how would depth of field be different from handheld subject, two different lenses, telemacro versus one-to-one macro? Is that kind of going back to what you were saying, Jen, earlier?
What was the question?
Jen's answering another question. We're getting lots of questions, Janet. Bear with us.
Sorry, I was trying. I didn't realize I wasn't on mute. You probably heard me typing that whole time. I was trying to answer a question about lighting, flash versus constant lighting. And anyway, I'm sorry. What was your question, Ben?
So the question being asked, how the depth of field be different between handheld one-to-one macro lens and a handheld telemacro lens?
I think the biggest difference is that, well, a telemacro lens typically isn't one-to-one. That's that's really pretty inherent to a macro
Yeah.
specific lens.
But is the depth of field going to be any different? And with
depth of
the
field is very
handheld,
different. Not because it's handheld or on a tripod. That doesn't necessarily make a difference, except in terms of your shutter speed, and
yeah.
whether you have a moving subject.
And the question is there an advantage one-to-one macro versus telemacro, which I think, Janet, if you could go back up to that slide at the beginning that shows what, one-to-one versus 1-to-4.
Here's 1-to-4.
So
these,
yeah.
It's just how close you can get to your subject.
Right. And then
will also then affect your depth of
the
field.
size of that, whatever that object would be. So right here, the inside of this flower, on the actual sensor of the camera itself.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that you're going to deal with in that moment is how close you can actually get to your subject to be in focus, which is going to be variable between a traditional one-to-one macro lens and a telemacro lens. And then, of course, that distance to subject is going to force your depth of field to adjust as well. So it gets thinner, again, the closer you get to your subject. So a one-to-one, you can get in really nice and tight, but you're going to have that effect of losing depth of field and possibly wanting to move into focus stacking. Whereas if you're backed off a little bit on like a full frame camera, then you might be able to just crop in later and you'll have the broader depth of field that you want, which are kind of the two ways you could look at doing it. Did that help? I hope that does.
And then Janet, do you happen to know the specs on, I would assume not, or they won't be handy because they weren't included in the slide, but the specs on the 150-600 shots of the Hummingbird, like where you were at, like, are you all the way at 600? Are you somewhere in between? Do you know what your settings were?
Oh no, this is all the way out. I knew I wanted to get as close as I can. So I set my stool to be a little over 7 feet away, and to try to get a really tight shot, I definitely zoomed in all the way. My shutter speed, since I knew that at first I was trying to get him perched. So I knew that I didn't need it too fast. So I think I was only like at 1/800th of a second. No external light. That was all from the bright sun in LA here.
Yeah.
And because somebody in that last webinar asked if I use a flash or not, and I did it. As far as the one flying, same. I think he was just in that moment when he was feeding, and he was just kind of hovering around just for a little bit, and that's when I caught him.
Yeah. There was a question over here about like what telemacro is, and to speak again specifically on the Tamron behalf and on the one you were just talking about, the 150-600 G2, with a telephoto lens like that, like you were just talking about, you were able to be closer to this hummingbird feeder and the hummingbirds than you would have been able to be with any other long telephoto zoom like that. So that's what telemacro is, essentially shooting close focus or macro with a long lens, and usually at its longest end, which is why I was asking if you knew where in the range of the zoom you were at.
Oh, no. Usually with the telemacros, I'll zoom all the way out, just to get your true telemacro, because that's usually how you do it. And then you get as close as you can, your minimum focal distance.
Okay. Any other questions that we didn't get to, or any new questions for anybody?
And Lorinda, if you still have more questions, we could definitely talk on the phone in more detail about this. This is there are a lot of questions coming in, and sort of keeping track. I just want to make sure that we get you the information you're looking for.
This is a good question, Janet. How do you track your subject when you're zoomed in that far?
Oh, I forgot to talk about this. Oh shoot, I totally forgot to talk about this. So yes, that's another thing I learned with the using the focus limiter on the 150-600. It was the first time I ever used it. And since I was in such a confined space on my balcony and zoomed in all the way to try to get the shot of the hummingbird, and to try to avoid for the lens to accidentally zoom all the way out to wherever on beyond the hummingbird, I tried the focus limiter. So if you guys don't know what it is, someone in the last one didn't know. Here's on the 90 has it too. So I tried this on the 90 as well. So the 90 has a focus limiter. I don't know if you can see that. So what that does, if you know ahead of time, which in this case, I knew where I was standing with the hummingbird, you set your focus limiter. There's different ranges. I think there's usually 3. Full is the full range. So the lens will cover the entire range of it. Then you have the closest distance, and then you have from midway to the furthest distance. So on the 15600, I put it obviously at the closest distance. So that way, definitely helps in faster focusing on the hummingbird. So it doesn't have to, it'll just totally scratch out having to focus all the way beyond that. And I tried that, and oh my gosh, it helped so much. I don't know if you tried that, Ben, but it's really cool.
I haven't. I keep going off or muting my mic because the bird upstairs at my house will start, trying to give his input, and I keep forgetting when and if I'm muted. So apologize. I haven't tried that, no, but the focus limiter definitely is really helpful. And did you? So on the 15600, there's also the 3 different modes of stabilization. And I've always been told that while mode 3 is the best because it corrects for both axes and then some wiggle room around there, that mode 1 is usually good to click back to if you're going to be at 600 trying to focus on something that's moving and you're kind of doing this move, because once you at mode 1, when you press your release button, it kind of you see the stabilizer kind of click on, and it holds your frame a little bit, so it's easier to grab hold of something like a hummingbird or something in movement. So that could also be, I mean, I've heard that. I've the very limited amount of bird photography that I've ever done, that was I probably was utilizing that.
I'm turning our tech reps into birders now. Like Erica's like into hummingbirds now, I think.
It is pretty incredible. And there's Jeff or Jeffrey in the chat section said that your creativity is very inspiring. He's about to go play with some ideas in his kitchen studio.
I know it was definitely a challenge for me to find things, and I was just like, oh my gosh, because like I said, I usually don't do macro, and it was fun. And as I got warmed up, like finding things, I was like, oh, okay. Then you start coming up with other things too. And of course, like looking online for ideas as well, and I'm trying to replicate that. But yeah, I definitely liked. I think one of my favorites is this strainer. I like the strainer.
I also really liked that one. Yeah. All the color in it, like when you so before we did this, when we were setting up this Zoom webinar, this was one of the images that Janet sent us to use to put on the Zoom registration page or on social media, and this was definitely one of my favorites of all of those. The hummingbirds obviously take the cake, but this one's pretty great.
But yeah, so this was one of my favorites. Well, I think I like the Target. I think that was just for me, just for fun, because I think having the bag in the back, you see the bullseye, and then just to see it in the drop, I was trying to get that. I'm still trying to perfect it, but I think
that's pretty close to perfect, I would say.
Thanks, Ben.
We were talking a little bit about focus stacking already, but a question here about using manual focus lenses, like older manual focus lenses with focus stacking. Do you guys know how well or compatible older manual focus lenses would be with focus stacking on a camera?
Oh, that I don't know, actually. So I haven't played with old lenses or focus stacking.
All right.
And lots of people use older lenses on their cameras, especially those manual focus ones. Like they're sharp, and you just have to follow your distance to subject. I mean, like it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but then again, you can totally do it. So I'll just put that out there. Lots of people love just kind of taking that control. And those old lenses are cool. Like sometimes the coatings are a little different. They make your colors come out interesting. And you know, if you've got a lens that's been sitting around for a while and it's a macro lens, just go give it a shot. I mean, why not? It's that time. Get creative. Use what you got. Use what you can find.
Yeah.
And then a question here, Janet, that was actually going to be my next question. So great question. You run through your specific setup again real quick if you can. Looks like it's the slide or two before this shot you're showing us of the target water drop shot.
Okay. So yes, so I put the target bag. I luckily have like these clamps. I found them. I've never used them, and I finally found them. I bought them, and they've just been sitting in my lens bag. And I have them hung on actually that arm is a Westcott arm for reflectors, to hold reflectors. So that's just another extra hand. To hold the leaf right here so that I don't have to hold it. I have like this little, I don't know if you can see it. It's called a helping hands. They're for people that solder, or you can use it for jewelry making or anything. And so they have like these two alligator clips. And so I put the leaf there, and I'm planning to try it with petals too, but it was just easier. I can just grab a leaf off the tree on my balcony. So I just grabbed it. I had that to hold it, thank God. So yeah, so I learned macro is just, you definitely need the setups. If you want to do like intricate, complex setups like this. On the side, there's a little loom cube that's on the light stand, which is usually used for a flash. And then I actually have the flash sitting on my nightstand. The little bowl to catch the water. You don't see it, but I have a little thing filled with liquid, and I just kept dropping it. And then I already have it already set up, and I looked through it. What I did to try to get it really in focus, I'll try to catch a drop where it's kind of halfway about to fall off the leaf. And then when you look through your viewfinder, you can see as the drop gets heavier and bigger, as gravity pulls it down, it expands. So as it expands, you know, the focus is going to vary greatly because you don't know where it's going to be. So I try to focus as it's expanding in the viewfinder as fast as I can manually. And then once I see it's about to drop, then I'll try to catch it as it's falling. So that's how I got the shot, but it took a lot of tries. It wasn't easy.
Do you remember what your camera settings were, or flash timing, any of those specifics?
For that specific shot?
Yeah.
I know I kept increasing the shutter speed. I know I started off with like, I think 1/1000th of a second, then I upped it to 2/1000th of a second. So which I'm pretty sure this was what that was. ISO, I mean, I think let me see. I had it on auto ISO because I was shooting outdoors, and the f stop, it was like around between f8 and f11. I played around with those.
And it's I feel like I've heard this before, but it is good to like when you're doing macro stuff like that, you want a narrower or smaller f-stop usually.
I don't know, like.
Well, like an f8 or f11, f16 versus an f28, f4.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what you're shooting. Like this, I was outdoors, so all the lighting. Plus, I use external light too, a flash. So it was just, I didn't need, the extra opening.
Yeah.
I was gonna
Cool.
say something, I forgot.
Well, while you're thinking about that, before we all jump off of here, we want to remind everybody that we do have, like I said in the beginning, there are some special, offers, bonus rebates that you guys get for attending today. For the next 5 days, anywhere from $25 to $50 on most of the lenses in the Tamron line. So just, call Looking Glass. Ask them about it. They can tell you everything. I believe there will be an email that follows up with everybody with some of that information, likely in the same email with the recorded video for those of you that requested that. And then, yeah, any other questions? Janet, why don't you tell us your contact info, social media info, back up there quick. Any other questions for Janet? You can find her there. Any other questions for Looking Glass? I think probably most of us know how to find them. Otherwise, the number's in the chat, and they are easily found on Google search. And then, yes, thank you guys so much for coming and tuning in today. Like I said, we've got more webinars, so stay tuned to Looking Glass. We'll have one next week, actually, next Tuesday. I believe it's our last one that's scheduled, but we, fear not, we will have more to come. And with that, I think we'll close it out and bid everybody farewell and stay safe. And we'll see you guys next week and in the near future.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody.
See you
Bye.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye.